I think that's for a lot of people in 2020. And I said, any stunt they pull after 2020, it's either going to keep you further and further asleep, or it's going to literally go, okay, this isn't passing the smell test. Um,
Agreed.
and I think for those who are real or they have the spirit in them, they're honestly going, okay, game's on. Let's see what's going.
Yeah.
And I think personally, I don't know about the whole Rapture thing, but what I do tap into is either the ones that are really, really awake are going to get Elijah Enoch where they're taken out, or they're going to lose their heads with Noahide laws.
I've
And
thought
I'm
about
fine
that.
with that.
Yeah.
I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
If anything, I think it's come down to a thing where people have put so much faith in a rapture extraction that they don't have any oomph to do anything themselves. And
Agreed.
that's, it's scary.
Yeah. Agreed.
It's a very arrogant ideology in the sense where, well, it's not my fault if the pastor didn't save you. It's like you're supposed to get down and wash somebody's feet yourself. It's not about passing the buck onto an institution or an individual that has a degree. What are you doing?
Brandon, thanks for joining me today. I appreciate it. Appreciate making the time to chat with me about your work and what you see going on in the world.
Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. Um, I discovered you fairly recently and did somewhat of a deep dive into your Instagram and watched a bunch of your posts there. For people that don't know you or know what you do, what do you say when people ask you what you do? What your
Field
uh,
is,
field is? Yes, your
yeah.
niche, so to speak.
Um, yeah, I would definitely say I'm like in like a bit of a triune perspective. It's anthropology, symbolism, and etymology. And I kind of interfuse all of that with compare contrast of other cultures, equivalents, and variants, and coming to a conclusion of how to interpret what the occult believes in contrast to what's in the Bible. I guess is the best way
Okay.
to describe it.
Gotcha. Yeah, I know a lot of your stuff is biblical, and I definitely want to dive in to that and get your, pick your brain about what you see happening, maybe what you see in the future.
Sure, sure.
So I definitely want you to share some of that. So let me ask you this: how long have you been sharing your stuff on social media, doing this game?
I have been doing this since last January. I
Mhm.
was invited onto a podcast after I made a comment, and he's like, "Well, that sounds like an interesting topic. Do you have anything on it?" So I just threw together a bunch of slides, tried to make it in the best presentation form again for Facebook because I wasn't techie. I'm still not too techie at this time. But it was so well received. The guests loved it, and so he was like, "All right, I gotta have this guy back on." So I started doing a couple of sequels, and then I got other invites. The next thing you know, it's
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 kind of
become
blown up.
yeah, it's become a passion of mine, and I haven't spent a dime on advertising or all that stuff. So yeah, it's just kind of
That's
viral off from there.
so really maybe a little over a year. Is that fair? Like
Yeah,
or a little over a
literally,
year you've been
I think this would be the 13th month anniversary.
off one comment, right? It's amazing how things can blow up.
Yeah.
That's cool. So what's your background? I mean, give us a little glimpse of how your childhood, how you were raised, what kind of
Oh
maybe
boy.
led you to here, you know?
Oh boy. I mean, you could. It's a whole thing to unpack just in my childhood. So I had a little bit of a unique situation with why I was put up for adoption.
Okay.
Yeah, my parents. There was a home invasion,
Mm,
and they ended up uh yeah, the guy he didn't survive. They ended up offing the gentleman whose house they were in.
wow.
So that led to them, of course, being incarcerated, and so that put me up for adoption. I was almost about two. I had a bit of an ear issue with I had to have tubes in them because they were too small, so they had to kind of expand them and whatnot. And about 2 years was going by, and of course, I'm one of those. I don't know if I want to have that kid in Massachusetts. It was just one of those like, that's the repercussions. She still wants to keep in touch with the kid, so the social worker started reaching out to other individuals in Connecticut, and eventually she stumbled onto the family that I was adopted by. So
Mhm.
that's phase one. But so kind of I've always had a little bit of a rebel maverick streak in me. very contrarian in spirit. I just recently found out what that was because I have a thing where I call the political compass. There's 4 points to it. And I finally figured out, I'm always against the mainstream narrative since 2020 did not work well for me. I have to think outside of the herd mentality. It's genetically in me, and I can't follow the group. So I went to a school in Florida, and it was denominationally focused. I'm very much anti-denomination, and I was thinking to myself, like, we're not really learning anything. Like the verses I'm studying, where am I ever going to use this? I felt sometimes in classes with history, I knew more than the teacher.
Mm.
So I came back home and I started attending a community college. I met one of the best professors ever. His name was Professor Finkel, and he was teaching us English, but he did it in a perspective that it was we'd understand the psychology behind what we were reading. It wasn't just read it, give me your assignment paper, and that was it. He had us become invested and involved. And as a writer, I've been dabbling in that since I was 11. It just resonated with me, and he really helped cultivate a spirit within me that was like, I got to read what's between the lines. There's beauty in this. And then the second part would be gentleman's work by the name of Dr. Michael Heiser, explaining the Anunnaki space gods aspects from a biblical perspective, which is totally different from a lot of denominationists that just like, no, it's not part of the canon, it's
Yeah.
apocrypha. And I'm over here like, I don't buy the like, oh, just don't do it. It's like, I at least have to see what they believe and if it makes sense. Let me come to that conclusion. And
Mhm.
I stumbled into it. And the next thing you know, I have my own little niche in that field, but I don't see anybody else touching, honestly. So I'm kind of grateful that I have that unique twist and insight that I can bring to the table.
Yeah. Well, I don't think I've ever seen anyone talk, are you talking from a biblical, blending a biblical viewpoint and the Anunnaki?
Yes,
Is that what you're saying?
the
Will you
Anunnaki and
expand
how,
that a little bit and tell
yeah.
tell us a little bit about what you're seeing there, what you're thinking?
So what I see with that, like that was the foundation basis for me. But then I started digging a little bit more, and eventually, a gentleman at my former job, I call him Sensei James because
Mm.
the guy got me thinking. So I said, "Can I call you Sensei?" Because Sensei means one who's been before born. Like they have insight because they've been through experience. And he gave me a name, and that was kind of the funniest part. Is it was like detective work from there. Give me a name, and I'll find your guy. And he gave me the name Tammuz. And I did a deep dive and figured out that this is the occult's Messiah. I figured out all of his equivalents and variants connecting to the Tri-Hermes and the Emerald tablets. And like again, once you refer to the shows, it just unraveled this whole world for me. And I started seeing some etymology coincidences and numerical coincidences. And at a certain point, I was like, holy crap, I think I just figured out what they're on, like what their end game is. I can start seeing things because I understand how this can connect to the Bible. Since the Tower of Babel, a lot of people seem to think is that was just a chapter in the Bible, that's it. But the occult still follows it very much to this day. You see it in Hollywood all the time. And I think my stuff as well, I explain the Christmas tree as opposed to, oh, it's just a pagan. I go into full on explaining, let's not swing at the branches. Let's go for the roots. What does this mean to the occult? Why do they do the things they do? A lot of people in the Christian faith, I have to admit, they don't stop to ask, why do we do the things that we do? And this is like our everyday culture. We get into the checkbox mentality. We do what we do in society. We go out, we sit down, we get lunch, we sit down. We don't really sit and reflect. Where's the tradition? What's the etymology of a word I'm saying?
Yeah.
And that's where I try to connect an old culture and try to explain, do you see the visuals yourself? Do you see the etymology yourself? Here's a bunch of sites because a lot of people will just talk, they'll be all prominent in a suit and sitting on a stage and they'll tell you what they know from their research. What I'd like to do in contrast is I've already delved into this. Does it mean I'm smarter than you? No. Intelligent people thrive off the ignorance of others. I'm sharing with you, I'm showing you where you can compare contrast. I'm giving you the visual of like, do I sound crazy? Possibly. But here's a reference to, you can dig into it yourself. And I think that's something where I don't see that in a lot of teachers, is that don't listen to me. I'm not a
Yeah.
charlatan. I'm not trying to, get your money from you. I mean, I appreciate the support, don't get me wrong, but I'm not here to grift you. I want to
Yeah.
actually educate you. And I think that's why some pages that I see that are truther, it irks me because I'm like, you're you're giving them just oh, here's a creepy number, here's a creepy gesture,
Yeah.
but there's no context. And it drives
Right.
me crazy.
It almost seems, and I've fallen into that trap on my own journey of sharing knowledge and information. And what it is I see it's a regurgitator as opposed to a researcher, or like you said, they're not looking at why, they're just it's almost like a rudimentary aspect of it. It's not a deeper dive into the meaning and the history and that sort of a thing. That's my perspective.
Well, I was explaining on Antoine's, I call it societal parrots. We
Mm.
we have it where people, this is programmed. They're charlatans. The soothsayers are the ones that are telling you, like a Tucker Carlson, a Russell Brand, Rachel Maddow, whoever. They sit there, they regurgitate what they hear, like Daily Wire, Ben Shapiro, and then they just quote them. But it's
Yeah.
like, what do you personally think? Turn that off for like 3 months. What is your opinion on this video? What is your opinion on this event or this history? And a lot of times that you leave them bewildered because then they just start sputtering around
Yeah.
like a hamster in a wheel. They just regurgitate what they hear. It's a societal parrot. And I'm like, if you're just becoming a programmed robot, recycling what you heard in the television, you're not learning. You're not a critical
Mm.
thinker. And that's scary. And as I was saying to my buddy,
Very.
you have liberals who are absolutely clueless, and you have Republicans, they're kind of arrogant to the point
Yes.
that they can't even admit
Yes.
they could be wrong sometimes. That's why I've always been a centrist. Every test I've taken, I'm like, I'm not surprised.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm
Well,
like right in the middle.
you're about the truth. The far ends of the spectrum, that each
Yes.
of them can be dangerous in their own ways, or, cause problems. But it's like, I agree. I feel the same way. While I am more conservative, I think to myself, you guys are causing just as much trouble as the left is.
Yes. And they don't see it
They don't see it.
because they're so
Well,
arrogant about
they
what, oh, could I possibly be wrong?
they are arrogant, and I'd love your take on why that is. From my perspective, it almost seems like because of the education system, because of the way people are raised and they're spoon fed their whole life, I don't think many people know how to think or know
Yeah.
how to do research. What's your take on, like you said, it's scary, and it's kind of become, people can become zombified, and they aren't doing any, they're basically in like a hypnotic state, and they're never being told. What's your take on why people have an inability to deep dive or critically think?
Beautiful question. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
That is very well put. Well, that's just like when I did the post on Gen Z. Not sure if you saw that, but I played in the background was the intro theme to The Walking Dead. Now, if folks wanted to pause and go look that up real quick, just do YouTube, listen, and what do you hear? You eventually hear a drrrr, drrrr, and I'm like, do you understand what that is? The Walking Dead is not the zombies. It's the people in the story, the characters who survived, because it's just a matter of time until you're dead. With that
Mm.
scraping sound you hear, that's a baton of a warden scraping your cell. Ring, ring. So when
Mm.
when I'm listening to this, I'm like, even the littlest thing like that is weird. They've locked you into a little box, and in our society has become like this, is that you can't think outside the box. You can't think outside your blinders because they have it so cookie cutter. And part of this is the Rockefeller education system by design. And I think the other half is it's honestly laziness. And I'm not sure if it's the food. I'm not sure if it's just because they've given us the ability to have a phone and we could just instantly look it up. It's like a fast food. I can just
Yeah.
look it up if I wanted to, or I can find some article that disproves you, or there's a fact check on that. And a lot of times, like I'll urge my followers, like, don't take my word. Like, and I can do 200 and something words in a inscription. Watch a podcast. I feel so much more in a 2 hours. It's like, well, play it in the background. You don't have to, but if you wanted to hear the one
Yeah.
visual thing I'm talking about, pick it up. But I think we've have it where society, they want to be entertained. They don't want to be educated.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I noted this because I was over at my neighbor's house and we were over there for some holiday. and the girl was saying like, "Oh, you're into blah blah blah," and I'm like, "Yeah, I'm into podcasting, I'm into this," and then I was talking a little bit about political views, and she started getting a little uptight, and I said, "Well, you could be educating yourself and read a book sometimes." Well, and I know she watches TV a lot in her room, and so I says, a lot of people they watch like 10 episodes on Netflix. They can binge the whole show when it first comes out. I says, and you don't have time for an hour or two podcast? Yeah. And that's what we've done. They have created so much bread and circuses that people are content, that they don't want to pick up the book. They don't want to read. They don't want to listen. They just want to have their opinion. And that's why I'll get people when I do something on Trump. Oh, how come you never go after Biden? I'm like, there's enough plethora of sites that do that.
Yeah.
Somebody needs to be against that current. And I kind of like it. I sometimes do it just to like if I get a bunch of followers, I do it to get rid of them.
Yeah.
I'm not in this to get fame. I'm in this to make sure you're on the right path as me, and not as in I'm right. It just I want to make sure you're not going to get frazzled out if I give you real stuff to consider.
Yeah. If I ruffle your feathers, so to speak, because
Yeah.
and to that point, I appreciate your recent post on Trump and Israel. That was a long
Yes.
post on Instagram. I appreciate that.
Yes.
Yeah, every now and again, because you kind of have to shake the tree and wake people up, because I think people have a tendency to go back to sleep, and I equate it to some of the things that I've learned about the brain. It takes an enormous amount of energy to run and think, and it's and then you got to learn how to think, if you're not ever taught how to think. But when it's an energetic thing, and so the brain constantly wants to put us on autopilot, like, and get on, like you say, get on the track, and it's dangerous to be there, which
Right.
I feel the same way. I look around at people and I'm like, that if you're not thinking and they're thinking for you, you're in danger. But people just
Yes.
don't connect the dots all the time,
Right.
you know?
Right.
But yeah, I find that fascinating. And to your point about the diet and whatnot, I do think it's like a combination of things like you mentioned there.
Yes.
I look at the food people put in the body, whether it's fast food or processed food, and the brain's not going to think properly, the body's not going to work properly.
Yes.
It's a wild ride in this in this world, and we got shown a lot about where people were at over the last 3 years, 2020, 2021. What did you, when 2020 went down, where was your mindset? What did you perceive was happening at that time?
It's funny. I truly think it was a godsend because I went through a lot of trauma in the adopted home, and enough where I'm able to now empathize where my birth mother was at mentally. She's kind of just looking for anybody. So I've had a lot of the same experience, seeing what went down in the home. So I came back from school, and people again. I think another thing in society is that they're just like, oh well, I got you a job. That's it. No one was asking the young guy, what are your talents? What are your visions? And nobody was cultivating that. I was just kind of taken from home and just thrown out into the world. And they were putting me into the machine. And I was getting a little bit to the point where I don't want to say the word, but I was getting to that point because I was like, I'm saying as much as I can that I need help
Mm.
without knowing exactly what I'm trying to say, you know?
You were struggling
Yes, mentally.
psychologically, mentally. Okay, gotcha.
And it was to the point where I was very, so I quit my job and I took this is it's on the top of my profile, the black and white one. It was my hiatus from humanity. I took 7.5 months off, and I read a ton. I took showers. Sometimes I had to shower running for 2 hours, just to think because it was the water was helping me just think process. The water has always had that effect with me, and I was reading, I was praying, and eventually I kind of came to a breaking point where I was like, okay, I finally figured what was going on. And apparently, my dad was doing stuff with one of my sisters, and there's all the secrecy had a
Hmm.
rippling effect because I'm an empath, and I picked up on that. Especially as a writer, you tend to understand that, but I wasn't understanding because we were so sheltered at the homeschooling thing. I didn't understand. Oh, that's not normal, you know.
Hmm.
So I'm coming off the verge of this, and I'm probably the best mental clarity I've ever had in my life. I was making friends, I was having some great dates, and then I'm going back into work, and the whole world, it was literally like Rip Grimes waking up from the hospital, and I'm like, what the hell is going on? I'm finally at a point where I'm like, I now have a purpose. I'm now excited about life. And everybody's going, oh my God.
Yeah.
And for me, I never bought it for a second. I literally was, as a Christian, I was looking at my church and I'm like, how is it we serve a God whose son conquered death? Again, for anybody who didn't know, and we're all wearing this emblem of fear, like in death. And I only wore it once because again, it was the first week. But then after that, I was just like, no, this ain't for me.
Good for
My
you.
pastor was wearing gloves, and I was
Wow.
down in junior church for like 14 years as a teen because I tend to relate better with kids because I find most adults to be liars or they're just very shallow. I can't
Yeah.
even have conversations with them. Whereas kids, they're evolving, they're growing, and I think part of that was because of my adopted background. Um, I gravitated to want to be a big brother figure because I understand when you don't have somebody to
Yeah.
help you. And I took like a week or two, three off from being downstairs. And again, I wasn't a teacher. I was just a guy who walked around, an assistant. And the pastor was going like, "Oh, if you're not going to show up regularly, then maybe you should just be upstairs all the time." I was like, "Okay." And nobody's asked me why I wasn't down there since or when I'm coming.
Really.
And I was supposed to be the president on the board. I was the president or something. Again, they said by
Hmm.
name, but like no one has asked me that. And that just proved to me all the more is that it's a building to them. It's a corporation. There is no living of what you believe. And for myself, I saw the hypocrisy and I was like, you know what? And that's actually what got my page going. I was so pissed about what I was seeing there. I started writing and doing posts on reality. And the next thing you know, I'm up to 8,000 followers. I had less than 100 like on 2020. And the next
Wow.
thing I know, it's
So
like,
just expressing yourself about, so are you
yes,
saying it started with you were inspired to write about what was happening at your church, or were you writing about the bigger picture in the world as well?
yes. I think I was tired of seeing the blinders that the church doesn't want to see. Like I was like, you do realize that this what this symbolizes, right? And I knew it, but I was like, you won't even let me speak here. I can't even have a
Mm.
conversation with you. So I said, all right, I'll try the internet. It's my account. It's not much, but here's something. And I started gaining followers. And the next thing I know, I was like, okay, I'm now doing podcasting. And I truly think that's all led of God because there's a certain point where you have people using the label Christian, but they don't understand a single thing about Holy Spirit.
It appears that way, doesn't it? Like
A
maybe back
thousand
what we talked
percent.
about prior, it's like even if you accept a label of Christian, you're
Yes.
still, came through the public
Yes.
education system, came through the mass media, indoctrination. And so then be the still and not the skills to research or critically think. Do you think that's what it is? Just like they're accepting the label, but they're still kind of one of the one of us or one of the herd. And I sometimes
They
don't
are.
separate myself from the herd in many ways, but for lack of a better word.
Yeah, and I think it's because I tell people this way is like when you're looking at the New Testament, he had the Pharisees, the Sadducees, and I call it bumblebees. What happened now? We have like the Lutherans, the Catholics, the this thing, and people have fallen in love with their denomination and their churches and haven't fallen in love with Christ. So they literally just rebooted the same thing on us. So when people say, "Oh, you're religious," I'm like, "No, I'm a guy of faith. Faith is actually application. Religion is following the doctrines and ideologies of men." And I'm like, guys, this isn't for me. Some other person was getting on me the other day for a post, and I said, I go to church kind of now to get insight. Like I feel like I'm sitting in a senatorial meeting and I'm the newspaper guy just writing my satire for the day because there's so much lacking what could be said in the church. And it honestly angers me because they don't have to be stupid or misled or um
Dumbed
like
down
yeah,
what's the word, kind of watered down, or
yeah, complicit. And one example is like there was an usher there, and he was wearing a lapel pin of America Israeli flag. And I look at him, I said, like I'm shaking his hand, and I said, you know you're wearing the Star Remphan. And he
yeah,
goes, hmm? I said, that's Nimrod's sigil, the star you're wearing on your lapel.
yeah,
And he goes, and I'm like, wink and a point. Like, okay, either one, you didn't hear me, or you
Yeah.
actually are sponsoring Nimrod. And I think it's because people don't want to have those deep dive and invest in conversations. Like, do you know why you wear what you wear? Why do
Yeah.
you do the Pledge of Allegiance? Like I just did that post yesterday. Again,
I
I
saw that.
I respect soldiers. Don't get me wrong, but at the same time, do I want to pledge myself to a guy whose background is incredibly messed up?
Likewise, yes. Well,
Yes.
and to that point, and I felt that way too, as I, have kind of well, I would say for the first time over the last number of years, because of what happened in 2020 and 2021, I got reacquainted with Christ and walked that path because of what was happening. Because, and also from an inspirational, I was inspired to do that as well. But
Yeah.
when I attend some church, they do, they talk about Israel in a certain way. And because I'm a big time researcher, and I come at it through the standpoint of acquiring knowledge and research, and I
Yeah.
don't know the Bible very well, but I do know, history and research because I'm a voracious, reader and an inquirer like you are, a
Yes.
seeker. And so
Yes.
it's frustrating when I think to myself, do they know the origins of Israel? Do they know who's behind it? Do they, it's just wild, as I'm sure you're sometimes frustrated with people that, are going along with it, but may not know the history of why it came to be. It's wild. How do you you know, uh, handle yourself in those types of situations? When you meet someone who is
For
regurgitating
me,
something.
it's like one of my buddies. Like I told him when this whole thing in the Middle East was going down, I told him, dude, you've got to take a break from Shapiro. Says it's not only bias, like I'm telling you, he is, and he quotes him
Yeah.
incessantly. And I'm I bought him some of the books I've recommended before, just so he could try to see the other side's point of view. I sent him a documentary, 53 minutes. You can't go wrong. He goes,
You can. It's an
you
hour.
have,
Yeah.
you have a more updated version. So I sent him a clip of a guy that's from there, showing what the Talmud influence of the IDF.
Yeah.
He never responded, and I'm like, guys, there's a certain point where you can say to me all you like is like, oh yeah, I just I'm interested in that, but and I hear you out, but and then you quote the other thing incessantly. You give me every excuse under the sun as I'm busy. This thing happened, that thing happened, and I've countless times I have bought somebody a book. It might have cost 20, $30, but I'm like, here, you had questions. I got this for you. 2 months later, got anywhere on it? No,
Yeah.
no, 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 no. And it sits. And it's like, I don't like being called stupid. I don't like haha emojis. I don't like clown faces. Somebody does that in a comment, you're out. Done. I'm not playing this game. You want a resource, DM me. Um, and I think a lot of people, to get back to what you just asked, I think for myself, I've been kind of culling the herd of I will spend time with some people. And then there's other people where I'm like, I physically, emotionally, and spiritually cannot hang out with you unless you're going to start asking me why. And I will tell you, but a lot of people don't want that because I am that reminder you need to start amping up your spiritual life. And I was saying to one of my favorite followers in Australia, and I said, I think when it's come to a point like at church, when they see me come over the hill, it's like a prophet in the Old Testament, like, oh, great, more bad news.
Right. 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 I'm glad you brought that up and mentioned that. What do you think, given the fact that the gospel is the good news,
Yes.
how do you reconcile talking about things that are uncomfortable and quote bad versus the good news? Where do you see the future, and where do you see we're heading, and in that sort of thing? Because I struggle with that too. I don't want to be Debbie Downer all the time, but
Right.
because my
Right.
whole thing is, I'm an optimistic person. I'm a happy guy. I like to have fun. But when I see the darkness and the things that are, and the lies and deception in the world, because I'm a human and I care about humanity, I have to go, hey,
Yes.
you want to look at this shit?
Yes.
How do you reconcile that in your life?
There's a Norse proverb is that a wise man is seldom cheerful.
Mm,
And that's resonated with me. Because yes, while I see all of it, and I'm not always trying to be negative, I realize, as my buddy's wife was saying, as before he came home, we were chatting because I was babysitting my goddaughter, And she looks at me and goes, "You're kind of depressing to talk to sometimes, you know
Oh
that?"
shit.
And I was like, I realized that. And it's kind of like being monk in the sense that I'm kind of like a Rain Man
Yeah.
mixture of I see things. And
Yeah.
sometimes I really have to say, Lord, forgive me. I had to be patient. I had to shut up. Now's not the time. And it's come to a thing where I also see myself as being a sergeant, so, spiritually speaking, is that I have to encourage the ranks. I have to kind of sometimes tease the private or something like that. Like, come on, you're a loser, yada yada yada. Like, wake up, you're the nah, nah. Because I think a lot of people have gotten comfy. It's become cubicle Christianity to the point that they become like a lounge chair where it says to pick up your cross. And I'm hearing you saying you're scared to lose your head, where I'm over here like, bring it. I don't care anymore. If anything, you're dragging your heels. Um, and I really see it where you do have to kind of be a little bit, not necessarily rude, but assertive in an aggressive sense, like a honey badger. You don't let anything put you down. You get bitten, you get back up. Um, and I think a lot of people, they're not tapping into what their spiritual gift is. And so they let it become docile and normal. They cling to their patriotism in the next election, and this guy's going to fix the problem. And God's like, I don't care about your vote. My kingdom is not of this world. I care about where is your heart? Are you trying to? And there's the story of the rich man, and he goes like, I've already done all this stuff. What else do I have to do? Get rid of all your money and follow me. And suddenly it was like, oh, well, and I think that's most of America,
Yeah.
honestly. And it grieves my heart, but at the same time, not everybody is at my level. So it is not required of me to bend somebody to do what I say. I will encourage the heck out of you. If you're in my vicinity, I will give you the book. I will give you the mentorship. I'll do my, like you said, I'm a positive person too. And I'll encourage you. But if you're going to be like, oh, I don't have time at a certain point, I'm like, all right, fine. I'm going to keep going without you.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I feel
Because
the same way, and I
they
gather
become
from
an anchor. Yeah,
you were right, and you are appear to be, I can see, clear on your mission and objective and purpose,
yeah,
and you can't allow anyone to pull you from that, because it's
correct.
a clearly an inspired path that you're on. And I feel the same way, and you're a leader to people, and you have to lead. If a leader sits down by the side of the road and commiserates or sits with a person who doesn't want to march, then it's like, well, what good are you doing in the world, you
Well,
know?
right. And it's like you enlisted, right? Well,
Yeah.
it's like, okay, I'm showing you how to use your spear. I'm showing you how to pick up your shield. And you're going, I'm too tired. I can't lift it. And I'm in that.
Yeah.
And I'm over here just like, okay, then you're not ready. Sit down.
Yeah.
Here's your binky. I'm going to keep
Yeah.
on going with the rest of the troops.
Exactly.
And again, a lot of people are like, "Oh, you're young, you don't know what marriage is like." But this is true with anybody, any relationship in general. Is that I came up with the thing where is like a partner in life can either be an anchor or a sail. They can either push you farther than you ever thought you could go, or they can hold you back. And people need to start looking at that with their friendships as well. Is that they can either push you farther or they can hold you back. And I sadly, since 2020, I had to grow up into the fact where I said, even mentors that I've loved, I had to say, you know what, you're not. I'm trying to now give back what you invested in me, and you're saying my stuff's not worth it. And yet I get DMs, I get messages, I get people saying I wasn't really into Christianity anymore, or I was a former Catholic, but you actually explained things where I want to do this again. I want to get back up. And I'm looking at my mentor like, in my
Yeah.
mind, I'm just like, you can't tell me it wasn't having an effect because that's all it is, man. And
Yeah.
I laugh because the irony of my name, and it's kind of like the painting that I put up. It's symbolic. It means well known. If you go by my last name first, it means well known beacon of light or hill sheltered from
Wow.
the storm. I'm
Wow.
supposed to be a lighthouse. I might be behind
Yeah.
enemy lines, but I'm supposed to be a refuge. I may not have the
Clearly.
answers, but I can shelter you from the storm as long as I can until it's time to go. That
Yeah.
It's my way of seeing it. I could be wrong, but guess what, guys? If it's encouraging you, take advantage of it.
Well, and like you said, we could all be wrong, but we've got to tune in to what like you say, what our gifts are, what our talents are. I mean, you're speaking a lot of my language, as I walk my own journey. Similar thing, one of the reasons that I started speaking out about what was happening and really started in late 2021, maybe early 2022, is because what I saw were people were being influenced, artificially influenced by politicians in the media and whatnot, and they weren't under their own. If a person's under their own influence, I'm fine. However you want to
Yes.
vote, even if you don't want to do a deep dive, as long as you're influencing yourself, I feel safe. I feel very unsafe when I see masses influenced by the media and politicians,
I was
and
thinking about
also
it.
being pulled off their purpose. Because look what happened. I mean, when you basically, okay, world, we're going to shut down, you shut down people's purposes. Doctors can't doctor, nurses can't nurses, everyone can't do their thing, and society is damaged. And when I saw that, I was like, oh shit, this is an all hands on deck type of situation, almost like EKG to the people. And so I really got, that's what lit me up, was a similar thing, and made me started posting about it. And your journey sounds very similar to mine, when I was
Mhm.
inspired to share some information, knowledge and information that I already had and that I was acquiring, but I didn't want to, because I was like, oh shit, I will ruffle feathers. I could offend people. Being a former people pleaser, that was a no-go for me for like two
Yes.
months. So
Yes.
your journey sounds very similar.
I think that's for a lot of people in 2020. And I said, any stunt they pull after 2020, it's either going to keep you further and further asleep, or it's going to literally go, okay, this isn't passing the smell test. Um,
Agreed.
and I think for those who are real or they have the spirit in them, they're honestly going, okay, game's on. Let's see what's going.
Yeah.
And I think personally, I don't know about the whole Rapture thing, but what I do tap into is either the ones that are really, really awake are going to get Elijah Enoch where they're taken out, or they're going to lose their heads with Noahide laws.
I've
And
thought
I'm
about
fine
that.
with that.
Yeah.
I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
If anything, I think it's come down to a thing where people have put so much faith in a rapture extraction that they don't have any oomph to do anything themselves. And
Agreed.
that's, it's scary.
Yeah, agreed.
It's a very arrogant ideology in the sense where, well, it's not my fault if the pastor didn't save you. And it's like, you're supposed to get down and wash somebody's feet yourself. It's
Yeah.
not about passing the buck onto an institution or an individual that has a degree. What are you doing? And like you said, some of us, okay, so yeah, sometimes you have the shepherd, then you have the sheepdogs. What do sheepdogs do? They nip at the heels of the sheep to get them moving. That's why I just said, like a sergeant, sometimes I have to nip at some heels as a watchman and say, keep moving, because you're going to get stuck in the
Hmm.
mud if you don't follow where I'm nipping you to get you out of that direction. And you may not like me, but guess what? I'll also defend you against a wolf coming to bite you.
Yeah.
And they don't, again, you'll never appreciate it probably in this life until afterwards you're like, oh, okay, yeah, I did it out of love. It's not because I hate you. It's not because I think I'm smarter than you. It's because I
Right.
cared about your longevity, what your
Right.
purpose could be, your potential. And I think some people they don't even they're scared to reflect and to see what that potential could be. So they go through the motions of what society and secular society imposes on people to what to believe.
Yeah. Well, and to that point, and I know you've alluded to this in some of your posts as well, as far as you're doing your work in the world, how does that integrate into a beast system type of economy? I struggle with that sometimes too, as
Mhm.
far as how to monetize this type of work, where it's not like, oh, I'm a cog in the machine that was created by the powers that be in this world that are making.
You made me.
It's challenging, and that's why, as I've been walking this journey, as far as really trying to hone into my purpose and mine those gifts and talents that are in me, because I saw my future being in the system, which wasn't a bad future, but I just had this inspiration to go and walk this path. And that's why I never fault anyone for not walking it, because it does suck. It does suck having to trying to make your own way and find a way to monetize your gifts or talents in a world that is like, fast food, entertainment,
Yes.
sports. It's wild. Where are you at in that? What's your thoughts about that? Doing your purpose in a world that doesn't want you to do your purpose.
I think, I've said this before. I don't think a lot of people realize I put my money where my mouth is. I cashed in my 401k. I've been living off of my savings. So when I say $5 a month for like 300 people, that would literally cover me. Every ounce that they put towards me, I cannot thank them enough. I'm very serious about that because I do see it as a digital missionary thing, and I don't see my posts solely as a, oh, they're all in the club. Huh? No, take it, show them, read the inscription, have a conversation. It's an impromptu tract because they used to have those little things where they'd go to a corner and say, read this, blah, blah, blah. Now you can do this at work. Now you can go over to your spouse and be like, what's your thoughts on this video, the 7-minute video that this guy posted? Like, have those discussions. And I think for myself, I don't need a jet. I don't need $1 million. I don't need a house. I'm living in a 2-room and a bathroom. That's it.
Mhm.
I don't need all the extra trimmings of life. I don't think I'm ever going to live to cash in my 401k. I'll be honest. I think by 2030, if you're a Christian, you won't be around much longer. And I'm
Yeah.
okay with that. And I think a lot of people, they're still thinking that maybe one more election could fix everything. Just one more. So
Yes.
they're scared to invest in an individual. Like I have nothing to gain. I don't work for a program. Nobody is puppeting me to say or give a monologue tonight on tonight's show. I'm giving
Right.
you my opinion, my advice. And like I said, I don't I was laughing because Klaus Schwab was saying one of the greatest problems that we've seen now is libertarianism. And I was like, oh, well, thank you. Because I
Yeah.
see it as in, yes, I might be a Christian, but that doesn't mean I convict you at the point of a sword. That's supposed to be of spirit. That's supposed to be you seeing something in me that makes you go, huh, I want to do some of that. I want to emulate some of that. And I think there's a quote by Gandhi, like, I like your Christ, but I don't like his Christians.
Wow.
And there was an evangelist that put it, I think, the best. I think his name was Gypsy Smith. He says there's 5 gospels: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and the Christian. But most folks don't read the first 4.
Wow.
So, like we've been saying, I think it's come down to I'm trying to do the best I can. And if you can throw me $5 for the tent maker fund or, have these
Right.
conversations, and I'm young. Do you think I like going on a date with somebody that doesn't know how many stars are in the flag or what state, how many,
Yeah.
like when they're talking about a country overseas, I know where that is. I love geography. I love learning another language. When I was at my other job, I started out as being like, oh my God, I can't understand a thing this Jamaican guy's saying. But now I've learned to listen with an accent, and I love the Russians and India people, especially because they're
Yeah.
very funny.
Oh
Uh,
yeah.
and I've learned to love the differences. I've learned to love to ask questions. What makes you like? Why do you think this way? And to have fun with life. And I think a lot of people, they can't have even fun unless it's the entertainment, it's the sports, it's the
Yeah.
whatever. And I'm over here just like, guys, I'm willing to read a book and it gives and do that for you, but put a little bit back into what you're, because this is having a domino effect for some people's lives.
Yes.
And for myself, like, it's not about monetization for success or fame. It's just enough to keep on going because that's honestly how I see it. So that
Yeah.
answer your question?
It does answer my question.
Yeah.
And, you mentioned, you're willing to read a book and do this research. That's how I feel as well. Sometimes what I describe as what I do is I go out and forage for information, prepare it like a chef would, as
Yes.
you are doing, serve it up in a nice, palatable way. They don't have to go hunt for it. They don't have to go, kill the beast and, whatever. And almost like what the media could be doing,
Yes.
serving up the truth. That's kind of what I feel like. I call what I do infotainment, which is like, here's some information and let's
Nice.
put, spoonful of sugar, make the medicine go down.
Yes.
Um, it's wild.
I love how you put that because that's why I love something like The Onion or
Yes.
really
Babel.
dark satire, like something like
Yeah.
The Whitest Kids You Know. Once in a while, it's like, guys, I'm not trying to be rude, but I'm showing you through extreme satire, analogies, metaphors. Do you see how stupid this sounds?
Yes.
And
Yes.
if I'm able to do that in the goofball sense,
Yeah.
the jester, because that's what the court jester was for, is I'm going to relay hard truths with tact. That's the art of diplomacy. Ladies and
Yes.
gentlemen, remember that. And that's what you have to do is if you can put a palatable and put a little, and again, not poison, but
Yes,
you're putting
yes.
a little cherry on top. You're mixing it with a little strawberry jam so it's not
Mhm.
so bitter. You're making it resonate. And that's all I'm
Right.
asking, especially I see it very much that we should be getting back to the tribal mindset, back to the respect the elder, not the position or
Yes.
the title. And again, like I said, I might be young, but guess what, folks? I'm not dumb. I'm somebody that wants to contribute. And if you're in my
Mm.
vicinity and in my local, again, that's what I tell people. DMing is very hard because I can't go back and forth with a full commentary. Like right now, I would
Yeah.
refer to this kind of episode, like I told you in the email, as opposed to I can't have a full conversation
Yeah,
with
it's
you.
too much work. Yeah.
Yeah, it's too much. But I think if you're in my vicinity, if I know you, if you're a kid, if you're another peer of my age range, I'm going to give back what I do know and what I do have. And like I was saying in the beginning, a lot of people aren't ready for that.
Mm.
So again, it's a lot of love to give, but there's not enough people to receive.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
saddest part of ministry, when you're really in it, people don't appreciate you.
Right. Yeah, and that's something you have to come to terms with, right?
Yes.
And then, it's more of an inner fuel, like you're supposed to be doing this thing even though it may not be appreciated and even though you may offend people. That it hurts me on some level, but it on another level it's like I got to do it. I got to say what I got to say and I got to do what I got to do regardless. I'll try to the way I sometimes describe it to people is it almost seems like the bad guy, quote, whoever the powers that be that run this world, have
Mhm.
my friends and family and humanity held hostage. And I'm shooting an arrow of truth and they got him, and I have to hit the bad guy without nicking them. But I sometimes joke around a bit and say, hey, you got nicked. Well, you shouldn't have let the bad guy take you hostage. That's on
Yes.
you.
I love it. And again, that's something you could do with satire, like just
Yeah.
literally have them wearing flags or something like that. And then all of a sudden, oh, that was a metaphor. Yes. And
Yeah.
I love how you phrase that. That's very well put. Yeah.
It just feels like that, because it just feels like that, and I care about humanity too, and I'm part of humanity. I don't want bad guys to hose people over. And when I see what's happening, I'm like, well, yeah, I'm scared. And there are some times that I second guess myself on posting certain things or try to make it more palatable, so to speak, and definitely using humor. And ironically enough, I look a lot at what Hollywood does, a lot of what people like, Ryan Reynolds and his Maximum Effort company, because I look and I see, okay, well, how are the quote unquote indoctrinating people and bad guys, for lack of a better word, doing it. And I'm going to steal your way and I'm going to do it for good. you
And
know
that's the same way that I see it. And that's why I told people, like, why would you want to get an acting degree? Blah, blah, blah. Says I would want to because even when I'm writing, I have a trilogy. It's a steampunk versus medieval. I don't have any particular good, any particular bad. Yes, there's always going to be those characters, but like each faction, I want you as the reader to go, both are messed up. I mean, I like the character, but both
yeah.
theologies of the world, it's kind of messed up when you take a moment to reflect on the other side. And so it really divides you, but I really wanted to infuse like modern things that are going on into a fictional sense. So it makes you go, oh, nobody's really the good guy, nobody's really the bad guy. It's per individual character that's
Yeah.
moving this thing along. It's like, yes, and the world can be very messed up, it can be very dark, but there can be some light in it. And I kind of like playing with that. And I like you just said, I know I could do very well in the Hollywood cult
Yes.
because I have original ideas. I've told people they're like, what show is that? I'm like, no, that's my ideas. And they're like, dude, that would be like a yes. And it has
You're a
franchise,
creator.
universe.
Mhm.
Yeah. And on top of that, I have bloodlines. I connect to Franklin and Albert Pike. So
Wow. Oh,
I'm,
you really?
oh yeah,
Wow.
oh yeah. And I'm laughing because instead of going into it and like again, I could probably get a deal where I could get to the top real quick.
Sure.
I know the end game. I understand. I'm like, I understand the metaphors. I understand the symbolism. What am I doing all of a sudden? I'm not even initiated and I'm already betraying what they
Yeah.
know, the ones at the top. And I'm trying to educate the other side. And I think there's not a coincidence that in my genealogy, I'm related to a guy that was so deeply enmeshed with this that he's perverted a lot of people, like good Christians, to join the secret society and then ruin and corrupt them. It's like investing a poison. They've been bitten and they
Like
don't.
infiltrate a secret
Yes.
society and turn
Yeah.
it good? Is that what you're saying?
Well, that's what I'm trying to do. Is like
Sure.
instead of being like, oh, I don't want to get into the Masons because that's just creepy. It's like, and yet you worship their Messiah every Christmas.
Yes.
That's where I'm. That's again. Or
Yeah.
why didn't you do this? It's like,
Yeah.
well, I can explain it to you. Well, I think it could, I'm like, no. Now I'm giving you context that they're thinking, ascension, regenerate, and it's not just a, oh, you're just a. It's like, oh, that's kind of sick. And it's like, yeah, and you see it here, you see it here, and you see
Yeah.
it here. I can't even go to a store without seeing something on a logo, a T-shirt, a jewelry, and it's really annoying. But at the same time, it's like, folks, instead of just saying, I don't want to know about that because I'm going to get pulled out at some point, try to understand this is the stuff that dictates your politics. So when you're going into a voting booth and you think you're making a change, it's statistics of gullibility. They've
Yeah.
selected the candidates. Now it's just an assessment to see how far we can get away with something based on your party.
Yeah.
That's what it's down to. I'm sorry to tell you, folks. And I think after the 1800s, it's been kind of going like that. I think before, because I've looked at the thing, not really that as many were Masons in between like 1812 to like 1850. And even the guy that was before Lincoln, he literally says, I am the last president of the United States of America. Mason.
Really.
Lincoln wasn't even on the ballots for a reason. And all of a sudden, this guy tried to change everything. He pissed off Rothschilds, and they're like, next guy that comes in, another Mason. It goes right back into the system. And that,
I'm glad you, or go ahead.
no, go ahead. I
Well,
was,
I'm glad you brought that up because that's one of the questions that I wanted to ask you. Do you think the United States was formed as a grand illusion, or do you think it started as this, country based on God and for free men, and then it got converted by the evil powers in the world at some point down the road? What's your thoughts on that? Because I sometimes struggle. I'm like, is it all a lie? Like, is the United States a complete lie, or did it get turned?
based off of what I've looked into, I think the original, like the Puritan the original people that get here, I think they honestly were just trying to get away from it all. By
Okay.
the time we get to the 1700s, shirt sleeves were rolled up, societies were already infiltrating, and they eventually came up to the conclusion is like, okay, we're ready to launch our plan. And ever like our inception of an actual country as opposed to being a colony,
Mhm.
that's when we became a force to be reckoned with. That's when we became very Masonic and very
Okay. So
um
at the inception, so to speak, there was
correct.
evil players with their puppet strings, puppet masters. Is that what you're
Because
saying?
yeah, we were originally known in the Native American thing by there was two names for America. One was the Tortoise Island, all the Americas. And I find that ironic because Hermes, the guy with the Caduceus staff,
Hmm.
one of his things is connected to turtles. And
Wow.
the second one was the land of the Phoenix.
Mm.
And if you looked into my stuff with Tammuz, they're trying to resurrect their Messiah one last
Yeah.
time, the Tri-Hermes. And therefore, I think they eventually concocted where this could be his land, this could be the place where he's reborn. And if you're going in by the Zohar and what they're believing is that, New York is like the new Rome. So
I've heard that.
so the 9/11 thing was that was a coronation day. I'm gonna have some upcoming podcasts that is like people are not gonna be like, you already know the Bush thing, you already know all this, but I'm gonna
Yeah.
explain to you occult wise, this is why we did what we did. And you're at the end, you're gonna be like, oh, I see it. And
Wow.
that goes right into 2020. And
Is that so? So, well, everything's connected, right? And as you peel back the layers, right?
yes.
Wow. Yeah, I've often thought about that because some as I go on my own journey, as I start to uncover more and more, sometimes I think to myself, oh shit, like this is really scary, and then other times it's like, oh well, I guess
Inevitable.
whatever. Okay, so we're living in well, the terms that I've come to think of it again since really 2021 as I walked this path because I my thinking of 2020 was I knew they were up to something. I didn't know what they were up to because for 15 years prior, I was like, you know, government, you're negative, your news is negative, you seem incompetent, etc. So I'd already checked out. But when 2020 come on the scene, I was like, well, I wrote you off. Like, I'll give people a number of chances. And then once I realized you have nothing to offer me, federal government, and I'm
Right.
just going to do my own thing. I'm going to walk my own path, live my
Yes.
best life, so to speak. So when 2020 came, I was like, well, I don't know what you're up to, but you're up to something because you guys are no good. And then, of course, as it was revealed to me as time goes on, as it was to many people, they're like, oh, shit. Um, but as I walk my own path, sometimes I think to myself, and I've come to this realization again, well, this is a fallen world, and in a fallen world, who would rule a fallen world, and who's going to rise to the top? And you can't be a good guy and
Right.
run the United States of America,
This doesn't happen. It's not in the playbook, my
you
friend. And if
know.
you do,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if the powers that be, the puppet masters that are pulling the strings, and really it's changing for me on sometimes a weekly or monthly basis, my level of awareness and understanding. Many of your posts have been helping me do that, and other
awesome.
people's posts sharing information. And your post about the Super Bowl was super enlightening. I learned things that I had never connected dots before to
Right.
with that. But I look at the infatuation with celebrities and media and sports, and sometimes be like, oh man, this shit is scary. The numbers and masses of people that are worshiping, those players and the game. It's just wild, you know. But
For me, I've never been into sports even as a kid. And I think part of it was because my dad didn't have it in the house, but I think more so is just character wise. I couldn't understand why somebody would what is it, DVR or whatever, whatever recording thing.
yeah.
I couldn't
Yeah.
understand that you'd sit there when you get home after your whole day and you're going to sit here and watch people swing sticks and chase balls or bump into each
Likewise.
other.
Yeah.
I couldn't understand that.
Yeah.
I've always been more in love with the concept of a brotherhood where you like martial arts or me, I love swordplay. And I was
Hmm.
taking katana, and my sensei said, he's like, you take to it like a fish to water. And I'm like, yeah, I literally feel like almost like an ancestral thing kicks in when I'm
Yeah.
doing this because it comes natural to me. And I think that's where our society, we've taken it and we become like, what is it with those iPads? They become binkies,
Yes.
and that's
Yes.
even for adults, and it's kind of scary that
Very.
I can be sitting next to somebody and I'm like, well, who are you texting? I'm texting her. She's sitting right
Yeah.
next to you. Yeah.
Yes.
Even as a teen, I
Yes.
couldn't understand that, and I'm like, okay. And like when funny story, when I was like 12 or 13, I saw this beautiful girl, blah blah blah, and I didn't know how to talk, so I was a writer. What am I going to do? I wrote her letters all the time. And people like, do you realize people don't do that in the 21st century? And I'm like, I don't care.
She probably loved it.
No, she didn't.
Oh,
Actually,
she didn't
yeah,
take to the letters. Okay.
ignored it completely, just didn't say anything. And I was over
Mhm.
here like, I don't know. As a kid, I've always been the natural romantic. As I've gotten older, I'm kind of like, I don't care anymore. And it's funny
Yeah.
because the more I say I don't care, now that it's like I'm getting,
Right.
it's weird.
Yeah,
It's
it's
so
it's the
weird.
subtle art of not giving an F, right? The Mark
Pretty
Manson
much.
the
And it's like that.
yeah.
It says animal
It's
magnetism.
attractive. Yeah.
Yeah.
But to all people, like, oh, this guy doesn't give a shit what he's, there's this book called Mode One, and it's about male female interaction. And that's the whole
It's,
premise, is like, when you say what's on your mind to a woman or anyone else, it's like, it's so rare in this world of watered down pleasing and
yes.
sugarcoating that
Yes.
it's shocking to people, and it
And
resonates with people.
I think that's the thing is we've also created the society, and this is where I was telling somebody, it's like, I don't know about yourself, but for my peer range, I've literally seen it where you say you're dating somebody and they automatically think coitus. So if you're saying
Yes.
somebody that's 17, I'm over here as a Christian, is like, I'm not doing anything until we're married. That's, again, that's basic. But
Mhm.
in a secular definition, you're automatically affiliating dating with boinking. And I'm thinking
Yes.
to myself, do you see how sick your mind is that you're
Yeah.
automatically thinking of us in a bedroom context as
Yeah.
opposed to just saying I appreciate the relationship that's going on. Again, as a Christian, I'm looking at the rest of the world like, okay. And on top of that, they then bracket it where you have to date somebody within 2 to 3 years of your age range, or else you're a pervert. And I'm like,
Yeah.
you just cut down on a huge,
Yeah.
the ocean is full of fishies, but now you're just kind of like, I only do pumpkin fish and tuna. And it's like,
Yeah.
no, there is like a whole vast variety out there. And as Christians, I think it's very sick that we've merged the dating definition with something so dirty and derogatory that we can't even appreciate dating somebody and literally just getting to know them for getting to know them
Yeah.
purposes. I think that was something that what was it? What some professor was talking about, by the time a woman is done with college, if they haven't had a mate by then, between the ages of 21 and 30, this is something I noted, is that they adopt a dog or a small mammal,
Oh,
cat. And why? Because it's like a subconscious thing as I'm taking care. It's a maternal instinct.
yeah.
They call it a dog mom. I hate dog moms. You're making a mammal your substitutive kid as opposed to literally nurturing an actual child. And of course,
Yeah.
the guy, and again, I've heard this by my own peers, by the time she reaches 30, they think, well, if nobody's had her by now, there must be something wrong with her.
Right.
And she's over here just, like, again, they've ripped apart the society where nobody can even appreciate the other individual because, you get the other guys are like, I say something to her at work, you're going to call it harassment. So they become online digital warriors and watch porn as opposed to
Yes.
being assertive. Because again, when you're assertive, it's really sweet, but in this culture, they've created where it's very perverse. Or
Yeah, it can be
me too.
dangerous because women could be programmed to say, hey, you're offending me, or you're doing, misogynistic or whatever else. And
Yes.
and it has made guys, the whole movement of MGTOW, men living off in the woods by themselves saying, hey, I'm gonna tap out, which isn't a solution.
No.
It's a temporary solution, but not a, I think we're meant to be together. And I think that's what's happening more and more as people wake up. Are you finding people, what do you think people are you finding people are waking up a little bit, a lot? Where do you think?
I mean, for my personally speaking for myself, I think I'm seeing a lot of Christians are the hardest ones to reach
Mm,
because they're so indoctrinated and enmeshed with their
I would agree with that statement.
their doctrinal definitions that they can't, like, I tried sharing some stuff and they're like, oh, that's too much for me. And I'm like, but you still vote, you still do the holidays, you still okay. And then I think there's another aspect where I was talking to Tommy Truthful on his show, and he was saying that some of his biggest followers are actually teenagers.
Really?
And on his kind of topics and whatnot, I was like, are you serious? And he's like, yeah. He says, I have 14 to 17-year-olds. Says they tend to be one of my biggest fields of people coming through in my channel. And that made me really encouraged because in the Bible it was saying the last days the young people will have visions and blah blah blah.
Mm,
And even with me, I read Revelation 2:17, and there's a verse about to him who will listen and have ears, I will give to him the white stone or the manna, the hidden manna, and it'll only be revealed to that exact. And I was laughing because I didn't think about that when I came up with the name Manna Daily. I literally was
yeah.
just like, we're living off the word, trying to implement it. And I read that and I was like, there's stuff and nuggets that are in there that if you dig, you suddenly are going, was that for me? Because you don't read
Mm,
that until all of a sudden you invest. And when you invest, you suddenly go, well, that's thank you. That because it encourages you. And I
right.
think there's a rising movement of some teens that are seeking meaning again because they're seeing for themselves how shallow or they see how hollow our and superficial our society has become. And so therefore they're gravitating towards something. It's like something has to be an explanation here
Yeah.
because this is too vast to try to explain. Um, and I think so, yes, to an extent, I think some the younger individuals are waking up. I think sadly, statistics for the older and like 40,
Yeah.
50,
Yeah.
I think
Well,
there's a stronger portion where they tend to teeter on the other side of the
yeah.
rifts.
It could be that phrase, it's hard to teach an old dog new tricks once
Yeah,
behave patterns of thinking and behaving have been,
programmed. Yeah.
yeah, programmed. And I sometimes think if it's like anything in life, like you either have it or you don't, whether it's you have an athletic ability or you don't, or you have
Mm,
an ability or a desire to do research or you don't, or curiosity about life. And like you said, you can't teach someone, they either have the drive or they don't.
right.
It's not a good or bad thing. It's just, but I'm encouraged by your assessment of that. I think that's true too. I think there's sometimes their younger kids bullshit meters are kind of tuned in, and they see their, I think what's happening is they're seeing it, older people in their life struggling, and maybe because of the financial system, because of the craziness of the world that is just inverting everything. They're like, well, you don't seem happy and I'm not going to do what you're doing. I mean,
Right.
that's what I kind of think they're saying,
And it's
you
become
know?
a little bit of a movement of not for me.
Yeah.
I think that's
Yeah.
something that scares the system because it's making more people say, well, I'm not going to trust the government. I'm not going to do this. So you get a lot more anarchists and libertarians and contrarians where it's just like, I'm not going to go with that. And they're over here saying, please conform one more
Yeah.
time because we're this close.
We need one more generation, right?
Yeah. One more generation of stupid compliant. And I think that's actually the scary part for them
Oh,
is,
yeah.
like I said, it comes down to two major religions where one is trying desperately to keep their followers asleep and the other is trying earnestly to wake them up. And that is
Hmm.
honestly why they would have to make war against the saints because half of the world wakes up. Because if you have 10 bridesmaids, let's say that's 10 nations, five of them fall asleep, the other five actually are lighting the way. What does that mean? That means half of Christianity, I would speculate, don't get it, and the other five start doing something.
I'm glad you brought that up because and you touched on this earlier, and I want to ask you, if there are, let's say there are potentially two timelines for us, and again, I'd love your perspective from a biblical standpoint. Like you talked about, by 2030, you think it's going to be, for anyone who's um, doing this type of work and spreading knowledge and information, is is there only one scenario that's going to play out here, or is there potentially two things that could happen? What do you think?
Again, I think this would tap into like, does God already, if God already knows it all, why does he allow things to go down? And people have to understand is that even in the Bible, I think it was somewhere in the first Samuel or first Kings or something like that. I think it was David. He asked the question is like, if I go there, is like, he's like, well, yeah, if you go there, it's not going to go well for you. So he doesn't go.
Hmm.
But again, he's able to see, I know what could potentially go down if you actually do this, but he consulted. And that's also the thing with free will is that per individual case, God can have a plan for your life and he'll give you many options and moments to make that change and tilt your udder to shift where you're going, or you can just keep on going along with the current. And again, was required to go against the current. You have to pick up the paddles and start
Hmm.
running, or else you're going to just keep going with the flow. Like I love your thing, focus and flow right there.
Oh, yes, yes.
But you think
Thank
just
you.
to veer into that analogy, you need to stay focused, or you're going to go with that particular kind of flow, or understand where you're going. And I think some people they're grasping what they have to do, and they're standing up and doing what they need to do. Like somebody like yourself, somebody like me, somebody like a lot of podcasters just rose up and like people are saying this is sometimes where I'm getting fed because I'm not getting anything at church.
Yeah,
And I'm like, cool. I don't care where you're getting it, just as long as you're feeling motivated. That's we need that. We're human. We need to connect. And I, unfortunately, like me, I hate digital. I would
yeah,
prefer to give
yeah.
you a hug, to like, sit down, have a meal. I love having a meal because I do believe the whole thing that you're sharing life when you're having a meal. I love the dinner conversation. It's something we don't do.
Yeah.
And I think their trajectory, yes, it's 2030 by sure. So I did some gematria. I would say probably end of 2028, we're going to see some kind of disease X be released. I
Hmm.
would say by 2029, that'd be adding up to 13 gematria wise when you do single digits.
Okay.
It's death and rebirth. And then by the time you get to 2030, that's two and three. That's five. That's the number of man, pentagram on Baphomet's forehead. And they've already said that
Okay.
the new world order by 2030.
Hmm.
Um, and I think it was 2025 is when they're going to sacrifice the red heifers, and that's going to be towards
Okay.
September. So I think in 2025 it's going to start the 7 years. Personally speaking, I don't
Hmm.
know. Don't take my again.
Right.
I'm
This is
speculating.
your, yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned this because I wanted your
Yeah,
take on when you think that the timeline is going to play out. So by 2025, you think it's going
yeah.
to start.
I think it's going to start. And I think it's again. This says we don't know the day or hour. It never says we can't speculate the year or month. And again, they're
Mm,
off because of like they changed it from the 13 month moon cycle.
sure.
We're off by not going by the Hebrew calendar, by the so I don't think I can exactly know it's gonna be right here on this date, it's gonna be 2012, I'm not that, but I
Right.
can kind of speculate timeline wise based off of like the Wormwood prophecy, what they're doing with Project Bluebeam. I think personally there's going to be that disease, then they're going to have some kind of nuclear event. I don't know to what extent, something, I think, because there's something in Revelation that talks about a pillar of smoke
Hmm.
goes up. and I think that's when they would do Project Bluebeam, is that the space aliens, Anunnaki. It's actually the fallen angels from Under the Review for 80s coming out, but they're making it look like they're coming down. And then they're
Okay.
going to give you enlightenment because you guys all nearly blew yourselves to oblivion, and we're here
Hmm.
to now help fix humanity. I think that's probably going to be what happens. I don't think Christians will be around at that time, personally speaking. I think
Okay.
anybody that's accepted the mark, you've already been programmed into the system. You think this is what's the best thing ever because you now can ascend because they're going to give us all the secrets to how to do this. And I
Yeah.
think Christians, and by 28, 29, I think that's going to be the no hide laws kick into full play. Certainly, again, people, I might piss you off, but I think it's going to be Trump because he's already stated that during the synagogue massacre in New York.
Yeah.
I think we should just honestly start executing people that are anti. Yeah, I was like,
Yeah.
oh,
I didn't
and on
know he
top of
said
that,
that, but I didn't know,
on top of
but
that,
the more that I, again, kind of divine help too, and also people like you and different things. I'm like, oh shit,
yeah,
add another mark on the whole world's, screw, what at this tally of okay, we're gonna be okay, we're not gonna be okay. Put it in the
right.
so you think by so now say that again. So between 2025 maybe and 2028, you think the rapture event will happen? Is that what you're saying?
I think for 25 to 28, that's where it's going to be the two witnesses. And I don't know if that's Elijah and Enoch. I don't know if that's individuals or if that's actually real Jews, Hebrews. I'd like to say Hebrews and Jews because they
Mhm.
worship tree worship. If you look up UYEW, I screenshotted it so they can't take that away from me. But they were worshipers of conifer trees, which
Okay.
connects to, if you watch my other two
Right.
podcasts, Doppelganger and the other one with Pine Cones with Valentine's Day, you'll understand it all by then.
On your podcast on
Yeah, yeah.
okay, I'll check
Um,
him out.
yeah, that you'll understand. Oh, conifer. I clear it up where it's like you can't just think, oh, you just took that one base in Jeremiah and that's it. No, I literally go like, this is literally what ancient cultures believed in. I'm showing you their anthropology. I'm showing you where it's migrated. I'm giving you full on. You can't deny that there was tree worship going on.
Right. Yeah.
The history and the migration of how it got to where it did.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, so between 25 to 28, if that is the Christians, if that's podcasting, I don't know because you're reaching everybody. Everybody in the world's able to see it all at once. I don't know. It's just speculation because scripture can be kind of, especially when something
Sure.
prophetic. I don't know. If we do, cool. If it is us, I'm incredibly grateful because I would be laughing because people would not see it because they don't
Right.
want to see it. To him who has ears, but those of us who do, eventually, then it says the Antichrist has to make war against the saints. Saints as Christians, that means set apart. Those who are not of this world, he has to make war against them.
Hmm.
Why? Because they are the one voice against the mainstream narrative of
Yeah.
compliance. So you need to get rid of them. You need to shut them up. So you'll get people like Russell Brand, Tucker Carlson, and all this conservative stuff that'll make it sound like, yeah, these people are this and they're against that, and they need to go, and this is just sickening. We need to have a better culture and mindset. And if this is what they're still stuck in, that's not Jesus, that's not Christ. And what happened to Christ? Oh, you're not the Messiah we're looking for. So throw him on a
Yeah.
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 What if you're a follower of Christ and you're still doing that? You're
You're
probably going to be following in your maker's or your
yeah.
Messiah's footsteps. I hate to break it to you, and whether
Yeah.
it's hung on a tree or
Yeah.
it's going to happen. And I think people who are not afraid or they understand, you want to kill my body, fine, do with it what you will. But
Yeah.
my soul is being claimed by him. And as I explained in some podcasts, what I think they're trying to do ultimately is they're trying to the fallen watchers. They're trying to get their kids' bodies back, the giants.
Hmm.
It's not just, oh, you fell and now you're a demon. Demon comes from Greek meaning daemon, Daemon. It means a fallen spirit or a fallen being, dark spirit. When you get the word religion, it means rely, Religion. Place that with jinn from the Middle East, dark spirits. So when you say religion, rely on dark spirits.
Wow.
Nation, demon, nation. Don't become part of that. So what they're going to do, Fallen Watchers, they love their kids too, which were the giants. They're half angel, they're half man. They can't go up because they're an abominable offspring. They can't go down to where their parents are. So when their
Hmm.
parents are finally let out, what would you want to do? Well, first off, I'm getting my kids' bodies back, the ones that were taken from me during the flood.
Hmm.
How would you do that? Well, if people sign an agreement that their bodies aren't important to them, they can indwell them. They can
Wow.
indwell AI. Again, that's their AI servers are known as daemon. Demon.
Is that so?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. So I think the mark of the beast is saying, possess me, ancient Smith. I'm yours.
Wow.
Through
So
5G.
they're going to so they would possess people in lieu of in trade of their own reviving their own children. Is that what you're saying?
In a sense, they're kind of giving their kids' bodies back. You want to, again, 5G, Penta, 5G, God
Yeah.
Ram. God Ram?
Yeah.
Interesting. Baphomet. Yeah. I think that's
Yeah.
what they're trying to do. So while they're trying to get their kids' bodies, a fleshly body, a vessel again, what are Christians getting? I don't care about the body. My soul goes to heaven.
Yeah.
But I think that's what it comes down to. I could be wrong, but you get in Genesis 6:4, sons of God came down and had affairs with the daughters of men. Fast forward to the New Testament. Behold, what manner of the love of the Father that we, Christians, should be called the sons of God. Hold up. Are we replacing a former council in heaven?
Mm.
And that's why we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities. Oh, so wait a minute. So when we get back up there and judgment's going down, you're going to court martial all the old council and say, you were unloyal to me. You came down and you wanted to have a fleshly experience. But those who were holding the torch for me, those who kept the truth going, those who were accepting of my son, they're going to get everything you didn't because they proved they were striving after me. So again,
Wow.
it's the adopted prodigal son. And I would think of that from a spiritual realm. Because why would you accept them? They're like human. They're below us. Yeah, but guess what? They came back to me. They didn't
Mm.
wander away. They were like, this sinful life, this world, it's not good enough. I want to come back to my creator God. I
Hmm.
appreciate what he did by sending his son. And I think that's what ultimately it comes down to is that, and because they've kept us asleep and they've hidden giant of our history, like the Christmas tree thing, you do things now, impulse and tradition, and you don't understand why you do what you do.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and to your point about thank you for that dialogue. That's very
Yes.
helpful.
Sorry, that was
I'm
kind of a
going
lot to unpack.
well, I'm going to go back and listen to it again and to because get different layers of meaning to it. So thank
Yeah.
you. To that point with tampering and keeping people asleep, how much do you think, and maybe what versions of the Bible do you think have been tampered with the most? And what's your favorite version? That's more the more pure word of God.
Very good question. It's a very tough thing because I have a lot of people that DM me, "What's the best version?" And I'll be
I
like,
know
"Refer to
it's
this post."
yeah.
Um, I am not so diehard picky. I read King James. I'll be that as it may. He was a Mason. I do
Yes,
think
I've
that
heard that.
they've replaced like Jesus and some of the stuff or the real some names. I think they've doctored down. But we speak the tongue of the Gentile. I'm not gonna. I don't think God's getting on semantics with that. I think he generally is like, as long as you're actually believing as best you can with what you got in the actual story and sifting out all the, that's what it comes down to, I think. What I personally like is Philip's Bible, written from a guy from the 1940s that was a protege of C.S. Lewis, the guy that wrote Chronicles of Narnia.
Hmm.
I really like his because it's written in like a letter format. There's not like it's not verse and stuff like that. But I like reading with context. Frank Viola's assistant thing, like 120 pages, maybe 130. Um,
Okay.
the Untold Story of the New Testament, because it gives you context. Like this book was written 20 years after this. This was written 8 years after this. It gives you contextual, like this was what was going on in the culture at this time. This was some politics that were going on at this time. And so it's not just your blah 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 reading. You're actually getting I relate to this story now. These are real people. This was the scenario of what they were going through. It makes it a little bit more vibrant and alive.
Hmm.
Um, and then I'd also recommend Unseen Realm with Dr. Michael Heiser to give more Old Testament clarity of where they saw etymology, how they saw their culture. When I infuse that and I'm reading the Bible, suddenly for me, it reboots it of, oh, okay, this is giving more context as opposed to me just going through the whatever Mr. Pastor tells me.
Right.
I'm now getting a little bit like, oh, there's a little bit something more you're missing here, and it's very beautiful when you unravel that.
Okay. So is it safe to say that you don't believe they have tampered with anything enough that it could be mislead readers or be a detriment to the student of the Bible?
I would say stay away from anything with Zondervan Publishing,
Mm-hmm.
because that connects to the Lucius Trust and the what's his name? The guy Rupert Murdoch.
Oh,
Murdoch.
yes.
He's yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Definitely some translations have been tampered. I say
Okay.
KJV only to the extent is that I think what the best they tampered with was changing Jesus's name or something like that. But here's the thing.
Okay.
This is what I try to tell people, to at least try to take it with a grain of salt.
Mm-hmm.
But what the cult believes is that Nimrod and Tammuz, they're regenerated, they're reborn. So when you're saying Baal, Baal's name is another variation of Lord. Um, and what was the other one? God. They say that was originally connected to some other thing. When you say Amen, it's actually
I've
Amen.
heard, yeah, I've heard that.
Well,
What are your thoughts on that?
that was the thing.
The Amen.
I posted that, and some people were like, "Oh, the slides offended me." Read the inscription. I write what I write for a reason, so you don't get freaked out when you see that. So when somebody comes up to you and he goes, "What do you think about that?"
Yeah.
I'm not just going to blow them off because that's just not true because my KJV is right. Instead, I want you to go, okay, I understand. So when Christ died upon the cross, and I'm going to be doing a whole podcast on this, the
Okay.
use their tree worshippers, the ascension thing, top of the Latin Kabbalah tree, Corona crown,
I saw
coronation.
that in one of your recent posts. Mm-hmm.
And I'm trying not to do too much because I want it to be a beautiful podcast for some people.
Sure.
I'm going to
Sure.
be infusing a lot where it's just like, so King of the Use, they're putting him on a cross. I said, "You want to be our king? Okay, imposter. This is what you get. You get to be all mangled up in the same positions on our Kabbalah tree of life, and we're going to put
Mm-hmm.
you to death. How do you like them apples?" He comes back as the way, the truth, and the life. And they're over here like, no, 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 no. Tell me somebody stole the body. Somebody had to steal the body. So what does he do by coming back to life? He proves this regeneration, reincarnation, ascension cult are frauds. Your leaders, your mentors, your Hermes, bogus. I defeated it. I didn't come back in another body or vessel. I came back in the flesh. I can't. You already saw me like this. Well, I'm not an imposter. You see where the holes are, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
you see that? I am the way, the truth, and the life. I beat your own game. And they're going, oh, no, 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 no. So what I try to explain to people is just like when you watch the Chronicles of Narnia, and you have that line from Liam Neeson, the lion, going, "Don't recite the dark magic to me, Mitch. I was there when it was written." It's like, yes, because there's a blood oath connected to this. He basically usurped all titles of any former gods on this realm and earth because it's just like, guess what? I proved you frauds. So therefore, in the
Yeah.
spiritual realm, game over. That title is mine. Even if you try to pervert it and blah, 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 it's still my title now because I defeated you in the
Mm-hmm.
spiritual aspect. So that's why I try to relay to people is don't get personally, because some people get all into semantics. I'm like, guys, we
Yeah.
speak the tongue of the Gentile. I don't know. By the time I get to heaven, I'll be like, okay, I'll call you by whatever you want. I'm just
Mm-hmm.
happy to be here. I
Yeah.
did the best to explain it to the people that are around me because we're dealing with hundreds of years of lies. Who knows?
Yeah.
Even when pronouncing Ray of the Sun, how do we know it's not originally Ra of the Sun? Like, guys, etymology, like, things change.
Yeah.
We say things every single day, and we don't understand what we're actually saying. I think God is honestly looking where our heart and minds are at.
That's
I,
what I was going to ask you. It seems like
yeah,
that's where you're going. It's your heart and intention, and your so that can
yeah.
usurp or override. I got you. That's super awesome. Let me see what else I have here on my list that I may not have asked you yet. Did you want to add anything more, or did you kind of close the loop on your when you were talking about 2025, 2028, and by 2030, as far as the to my kind of question of like talking about free will and our power as creators created by the creator
Yeah.
versus the like desire or destiny of God. How do we, like, because I struggle with this. I know I'm inspired to do these things in the world for a reason to make the world a better place, help people, serve people. How
Yeah.
do you reconcile like our free will versus word of God that's going to play out? I mean, because I see there was two different things kind of going on,
Yeah.
free will, we're powerful creators in our own right, and then God's plan.
I think that tells me what it is a faith or things hoped for, but evidence of things not seen.
Mm.
I think somewhere in the New Testament, guys. Sometimes I know a verse, but I don't know exactly where it's written. But
Right.
that's not the point. But the thing is, that is very true. Is that me? I don't have to know every single aspect. I don't. I'm not. That's what I tell people. Is like I might dabble in gematria, but for me, it's more of a just like, oh, okay. And sometimes God's revealing that to me. Like I was doing a breakdown of 365 at 3 and 6, 9. Okay, I'm at 6 and 5, 11, 9, 11. How
Mm-hmm.
interesting. And I broke down what every single one of those mean and how that connects to the unholy trinity of Babylon. Then it connects to not, the actual 9/11.
Mm-hmm.
So I think what it comes down to is that people they're not willing to slow down and try to consider what something might mean. And it's because, like I was explaining, is when you have Christ that was in the Garden of Gethsemane. I'm laughing because you have the equivalent of the Garden of Eden. You have Gethsemane, Eden, paradise, Gethsemane, oil press. That's what it
Mm.
translates to.
I haven't heard of the Garden of Gethsemane yet before.
Yeah, Gethsemane is where he was going to pray prior to Judas coming over. This point you probably heard it was Judas came over, kissed him on the cheek. So this is where it occurred.
Okay.
He was going up to his father saying, if you could let this pass from me, I understand this has to go through. This has already been arranged. But if it could pass right now, I would really, and he goes through with it. And Gethsemane means oil press. And when they're doing
Mm-hmm.
this parable, the 10 bridesmaids, there were five who were awake and they're already there. They have their lamps, they have their oil. So when the bridegroom's coming, cool. The other ones fell asleep. Then they wake up and they're like, oh, shoot, we didn't bring our oil. So they run back to
Mm-hmm.
the house. They come back. The party's already in full swing. They knock on the door and he goes, what? We're here for the. He's like, yeah, but you weren't doing your job. So why should I let you in? You're supposed to prepare the way for me. And where are you? Depart from me. I never knew you.
Mm-hmm.
This is where I was going into the theology of Christians. So then Christ is in Gethsemane. He's praying, he's doing all this stuff. He keeps coming back to his disciples. He's like, guys, stay awake, stay sitting because they're falling asleep. I don't think it's a coincidence that he had them go through a phase like this.
Mm-hmm.
He's saying my own followers were falling asleep on the pinnacle of spiritual warfare. They didn't understand what was going to be happening, but I needed somebody to stay awake, to stay sober and vigilant as long as they could for what they see, like in Ezekiel 33. If you're an actual watchman, you're standing there with your torch, you're sounding the alarm. People might say you're crying wolf, but it's like I'm at least pointing to something that I see something coming towards the city that might be a threat.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's something or not, I'm supposed to sound the alarm as somebody that has been indwelled. And what people don't understand, if it says in Proverbs, thy word, Bible, is a lamp unto my feet, then what's the oil? It's the Holy Spirit. And a lot of people
Mm-hmm.
don't understand what is the Holy Spirit. If you don't know what the Holy Spirit is, you're probably going to fall asleep. And I'm trying to explain to people back in the day, Old Testament, I did this in the Sacred Seed episode. They had this whole place, the Holy of Holies, where only the priest could go into. And he had to dress up in white, like a bride and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And only he could go in there in the presence of God. When Christ died, suddenly the temple veil ripped in two, just like a bride's veil. What does that mean? God's Spirit no longer resides right here. It can
Mm-hmm.
now indwell us. And it says, greater is he that is within you than he that is of the world. Know ye not that your body is a temple of the Lord. Guys, you're now indwelled. You're mobile. You now have that gift. And a lot of people
Mm-hmm.
don't understand. Oh, that's what the oil is? Yeah. And what is it called? Oil press. You had to stay vigilant with your oil. Because if you don't, you're not going to appreciate your faith of I may not know what's coming, but I'm still lighting the way for the one that's coming. If that makes any sense. I'm not sure
It
if that.
does. It
Okay.
does. Yes. Again, there are a lot to unpack there, but beneficial,
Yes.
beneficial, beneficial. Because like I say, there's this kind of I look at it, if it is a battle between good and evil, and there's dark forces and quote unquote good forces, as we know, battles typically can be won. Like I sometimes struggle with this. If we're fighting and trying to illuminate and awaken people to evil forces in the world and shine a light of awareness, could there potentially be a quote unquote win? But again, I'm coming at it from a very, very newbie with biblical scripture and whatnot. So that's why
No,
I
it's
kind of
it's 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 good that you're asking that because I'm seeing I
I don't want to.
I get some questions, some comments, and I'm like, you've not learned a thing. Because I'm getting some person going, yeah, when we reach the fifth dimension, we'll take back and yada yada. And I'm like, what?
Yeah, well, what I to that point, it sometimes seems like there's definitely a lot of ingredients thrown into the pot, where you got the
Yes.
new age and the stuff like
Yes.
that. So you get some crazy, uh, convoluted statements. It sounds
I,
like.
ideology, theology, call it what you will, this Christ consciousness thing. Christ consciousness is bogus as all get out. It's actually Hermes, the doppelganger. That is Catholicism as well. Masons, call it whatever you will. It's a multi-headed dragon, but it all worships the same beast at the end, is the
Yeah,
ideology of this is the best that'll ever be. We can become our own gods and saviors.
yeah,
Materialism, wealth, this is what you look for. You can become your own god if you so choose. And I think that it's good that you are actually open to hearing even something that I'm saying, because I'm seeing a lot of other people's like everything you said was right, but we can become our own God
yeah,
consciousness because Jesus is in us. And it's just like, you're not understanding the humility aspect that has to come first. Like all this would not have been revealed to me if I didn't first say, you know what, I need someone to steer the helm of my ship. That's the phrase that I used. Because I was big into pirates at the time, so I used the vessel aspect of like I want you to steer the helm of my ship. And I'm not gonna lie, dude, I felt all like I used to have a lot of anger. Like my face, I was like Hulk. Anything in my
carrying doing it all, and you felt a weight was lifted off when you handed
breast.
over, surrendered that.
And when I said that phrase,
Wow,
literally, it's the most supernatural thing I've ever felt. And I'm 12. I looked over at my dad. He didn't see me jump, but I was like, okay, that was really creepy. And I don't know
wow,
how to describe that, but as a 12-year-old, it was like something touched you and you were just like, okay, that was okay. I said the words, but my gosh, that there was something there.
physical thing
Okay.
that you felt a presence in.
Oh, for sure. And the anger, it was, I think I inherited a bit from my birth father with the whole scenario I was telling earlier. I think I
Hmm.
inherited a bit of his anger. And all of a sudden, that generational curse was just like, no, not anymore. You're now
Wow,
mine. Like there was a hedge put about me. And again, like I told you with my name, sheltered from
right.
the storm. I think it's come down to where folks stop looking to the government or to some program or some chakra kundalini. Have to stop coming up so people are going to love it because it's going to be break it down once and for all.
Yeah,
That's all bogus, folks. What I'm trying to tell you, it requires humility in order to enter the kingdom of heaven. And if I could, just going to the analogy, when they're doing communion, this goes into a marriage ceremony where the dad would. So if you ever saw Fiddler on the Roof,
I didn't.
okay,
I
no,
should. Yeah, I should see
you
that.
don't have to. It's
I know of
propaganda.
it.
Propaganda. I was so brokenhearted
Is
after
it?
seeing. But just seeing the symbolism now, I'm just like, oh gosh, I know it. No, no, no. But
Mhm.
I'll give you a breakdown. But they had the wedding ceremony where the dad would pick the young man from the town, bring him over. It was arranged, but pour a glass of wine for the young man, and then they would, he'd drink of it. I accepted the terms, and then they hand it over to the girl. And it was here where she could say, I don't approve of my father's selection in the match. I would prefer that you pick somebody else. And it'd be
Mhm.
honorable. It'd be like, okay, we'll go back to the drawing board, all good. But if she drank of it, she's choosing, she's accepting of the father's selection. She's choosing the son. So when Christ is doing this and saying, this is my body, this is my blood, he's doing a metaphor for what? Well, I am my father's son. And as a spiritual sense, you're choosing of this cup. You're choosing me. You're choosing the father's son. It's a spiritual induction of just understand what I'm saying. And a lot of Christians today are going, thank you for dying on the cross for me. I'm such a bad, they're still beating themselves up. When it's a
Yeah.
marriage, I accept of the Father's gift. So God so loved the world, He sent it. And so what would go on in this marriage ceremony is the young man would go on to add on to the family's house. What does Christ say to his disciples? There are many mansions in heaven. If
Yeah.
it were not so, I would tell you, I go to prepare a place for you up in my Father's house. So
Hmm.
the fact, again, when people's like, is God incarnate? I'm like, no, it's Father and Son. And it's very significant that you get that down because you don't accept the Son, you don't get into heaven. Like my buddy was trying to say to me, well, I'm a good person. Dude, that's not it.
Yeah.
It requires humility. He's like, well, I don't want to divide my time between God and my kids. I'm like, he's the father of like. So yeah, sorry. I
No,
love that you asked me that because that's something I've been really wanting to answer for folks is yeah, it requires humility to find what God is,
yeah.
honestly.
And I've
Very
heard
humane.
that.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting. Yeah, I mean, these are interesting times, and again, as a person who hasn't been walking that path for the way I look at it now, just from from my own personal standpoint, is like, why on earth would, if you know what eternity could be waiting for you, if you do not align with God's plan? I mean, why would you not? But I think some people just don't know, or they just, like you said, it's watered down, it's convoluted. It seems like a no-brainer to me, quite frankly.
Yes.
But we're all on our own path. Let me just see what else I have here. I think this has been awesome, by the way.
Oh, I
Thank
love
you.
thank you. We got to do this again.
For sure, for sure. You're a wealth of knowledge. I knew you would be based on seeing some of your posts. Um, let's close with this. And I think you've touched on this a number of times, but maybe just kind of one closing statement.
Hmm.
What are you doing right now to be a good steward, for a good person for God, and follow the path personally? And what would you kind of offer to us as we wrap it up here?
Well, I think I've been doing a couple of slide compilations, and once in a while I'm convicted or I start crying because the slide itself convicted me and or it encouraged me in a
Hmm.
sense. And it was talking about like a prophet, you're going to be ridiculed, you're going to be mocked if you blah, blah, blah. And it was listing all the attributes or a watcher. And I don't I don't take on that thing where like I'm a prophet and yeah, I don't see myself as that. I just genuinely felt like, yeah, I've been going through all of that and it's really hard that I can't like if people are mocking me and it's like do you if you understood my intentions you would never be making them accusations against me
Yeah.
because I genuinely am trying to give you something that God has is inspired in me through the Holy Spirit and I think is pick up your mantle, pick up your cross, literally point right back to the basics of square one.
Hmm.
And if people don't know what that is, well, it's like stop being the rich young ruler. Throw like I'm not saying like get all freaked out and just like live as a beggar on the street.
Right.
I mean, if you're called to, then I don't know, whatever. Um, but I do think you people we need to start getting rid of the secularism, the materialism, and the things that are distracting us. If it's politics, if it's sports, if it's entertainment,
Hmm.
start trying to cull it out. Make it gradual. Like me, I've come down where it's just like I only watch pretty much old stuff for most of the time. Once in a while, I watch a modern show, but I mean, I'm not invested with screen time. I used to be a huge TV head, and now I would prefer reading or having a podcast conversation. For other folks, I'm trying to encourage have a documentary dare night or a podcast dare night. Watch something and say if you don't learn something, you have to owe this guy like $20 or something.
Yeah.
Just make it
The
fun.
game. Yeah.
Yeah,
Fun.
pick up a grinder. Or every time this person goes on to one of his rants, like I'm prone to do, but it's have
Hmm.
fun with it.
Yeah.
And it's something where um start investing. If you hate podcasts, pick up a book, listen to an
Yeah.
audio book. Um, yeah, that's honestly where I can say is like what I'm trying to do from where I'm at. This is one of my life verses was when I was reading Luke 22:32. He's at the table and he says, I prayed for you, Peter, because Satan desires to sift you like wheat. And that when you are ready to turn around and strengthen the brethren, what does Peter do? He denies Christ 3 times. But people always forget later on. It's when Christ rose from the dead. They're sitting on the beach, they're having some fish. Jesus says to him, he says, feed my sheep, feed my sheep, feed my sheep. You're ready, fisherman. Now go forth and start strengthening the brethren. And that's such
Hmm.
a beautiful redemption arc that we just glance right over it. He says
Yeah.
it 3 times. He denied him 3 times. Like, guys,
Mm.
you can be redeemed even if you once denied. You can come back. And I think a lot of people are afraid because they think, the accountability, the guilt, the responsibility that's entailed with that. makes them scared. And they, unfortunately,
Yeah.
there's that servant who hid his talent as opposed to try to make double for the master.
Yes. I think about that one all the time.
Yes. And as I told my buddy, because he's got a record, but he feels like all bad, and he's like, I don't feel like I'm doing enough. Like I'm like, dude, I don't know my God's mind. I'm never going to say that because that'd be
Mhm.
tapping into Satanism. But I know
Right.
his heart. 'Cause I read the Old Testament. I've read the New Testament, and what he loved us so much that he sent his son. So I know his heart,
Yeah.
dude. Like, I was reading something in Corinthians where I was listening to pastors, the teachers, and all this other stuff. There was like several. It says, dude, what are you? You're somebody that gives encouragement. Anytime somebody needs you, you're there. It's like, well, I don't feel like I'm ministering. I said, dude, when they ask those questions, you try to give it the best you can. It says
Mm.
that's enough. You're doing the best you can from where you're at. I think was it Roosevelt's nephew when they were doing D-Day? He lands like a couple 3-4 miles offshore from where they were supposed to.
I
And he
don't
says the
remember.
classic line, he says, you know what? There's nothing here, but we're gonna start the battle from here.
Mm.
And because of that tactical misdirection of where they landed, they were able to overwhelm the enemy because nobody was
Wow.
expecting them from that direction. Start the
Wow.
war from where you're at.
Yeah, good point.
That's what I would end on.
Like do what you can where you're at with what you got kind of a thing.
Yeah, it does. You don't have to be the best. You don't have to be the greatest. Just say, I
Yeah.
accept it. I'm sorry. You feed some sheep, strengthen the brethren,
Yeah. Well, it's like the story of the guy throwing the starfish, one of many starfish back into the ocean, and they're like, "Why you bother? There's just too many." Well, it mattered to that one, and it mattered to me too.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. That's awesome, Brandon. Why don't you end with telling people where you're at online,
Yep.
including your podcast and whatnot?
Sure. Main one is going to be Rumble. So like Swapcast right now. I'm looking into starting to do interviews. Mana Daily Podcast, all one word. Um, Mana with two N's, like in the Bible. And you can find me on Krollology, like my last name, ology lower underscore 101. I would highly recommend start following my backup because I'm getting a lot of Instagram harassment that I think I might be
Are
getting.
you?
Yeah,
And when
so
you say harassment, I know you mentioned you were feeling shadow banned the other day. When you say harassment, what are you referring to in that sense?
and I I posted it
Trolling?
yesterday. No, like I posted a comment on another one of my friends' pages, just saying this is one of my favorite posts thus far because she just started posting regularly, and
Uh-huh.
it marked it as spam or like I was trying to do
Oh,
something against community standards. I was like,
gotcha. So
okay,
you're on the list. You could be on a list, so to
oh, I
speak.
am.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you heard that story, but yeah, my
No.
buddy was browsing around on my Facebook profile. He gets a call from a Fed family member, not CIA or FBI, somebody in another clandestine organization,
Really?
and says, be careful with those kind of posts. And he goes, well, what are you talking about? He's like, just be careful. I know some Masons, they're good people, and you just need to be careful with that kind of content. He's like, well, why? Is just be careful.
Wow.
900 number doesn't even call him on our own personal cell and stuff like that. And I was like, well, thank you for confirming for me that I am most definitely on a watch list. So, yeah.
Wow.
So, anyways, man, a daily podcast. I'm trying to post older ones on YouTube. Some ones aren't going to have catchphrases where they're going to get upset.
Sure. So you do have
And
a YouTube channel as well then? Or are you
yeah, all
firing it
Mana Daily podcasts on
man
most things.
everywhere? Okay,
BitChute,
gotcha.
Odyssey, trying to keep it consistent.
Okay,
If they take out
good.
one, I'll just start it and they'll put like a 1 or 2 or 3.
Yeah, so you have a backup account to certain, yeah. Well,
Yes.
then that's what people do. I mean, every time I see, 2.0, 3.0, I'm like, oh shit. Although I'm not seeing in 2020, I know people were getting censored and losing their channels. I just because I keep a real close eye on people too, on Instagram or different platforms and see because as we're kind of moving forward and sharing this truths, you kind of look at the people to the left and the right of you and who's falling, who's not. I mean, I'm not seeing a lot of people falling. Are you seeing?
Yes,
Are
actually,
you seeing?
I was looking for a guy's account the other day because I know that he scrubbed number one. He did too. I even asked one
Okay,
of my followers. I said, "Did I piss him off?" So I don't because sometimes I do that.
sure.
Block me. So could you kind of? And she's like, "I can't find him either." And she's
Okay, so you're
very good
seeing
at
some
research.
censorship and deleting of account. Okay, still, and it's not surprising. I mean, um, but so you're everywhere. Mana Daily Podcast,
Podcast or Krollology 101 at the moment,
Horology.
Krollology 101. But again, Patreon, if you could support or follow just
Yes.
there, that's Man a Daily Podcast as well.
Okay. Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you, Brandon. I really appreciate it.
Yep.
Um, have an awesome day, and thank you for spending the time and sharing your knowledge. Lots of good stuff.
Thank you for having me on. I love this talk. It's finally something intellectual.
I appreciate that compliment. Thank you.
Yes, yes.